All right. Everyone say hello to Herman today. Hello, Herman. Hello. What? Did you hear that? Okay. All right. On our classification of organisms. Great. So, as I mentioned, we're how we classify. Right. We have to take a unit of soil, okay, and extract the DNA out of the soil. It's not very conducive to a full illustrative question to look under a microscope, assuming we had an electron microscope, right? We wouldn't be able to get a representative survey of all the creatures that are there. So we do it via DNA. So also in our classifications, right, we're going to zoom back to science class, okay? And we're going to look at our prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Things have come a long way. We had to start somewhere in our classification, right? So prokaryotes are unicellular, 1 to 10 microns, and the main difference here in the prokaryotes, right, is that they don't have a nucleus or mitochondria, okay? They're not a complicated unicellular organism, right? Similar to such as protozoa, okay? And our eukaryotes are multicellular, have a nucleus and other organelles within membranes, such as mitochondria. And for instance, that goes everything from plants, animals, us, right, fungi, and protozoa. Was I going to think about a thing? I forgot. Keep going. All right. Genetic is one way, right? And then metabolic is another method of classification of organisms, okay? So we have mainly our two classifications, right? Is where an organism gets its source of carbon from, right? Because all of us are living essentially off carbon, even plants living off carbon and carbon dioxide, and we're living off carbon from carbohydrates, right? Or lipids that are condensed carbohydrates, etc. Okay, and so combined organic carbon is for instance that, right, such as carbon in organic form already, bread and meat, etc. Right, or carbon dioxide. Okay, so we also have biochemical oxidation and solar radiation, right? So whether we're getting the energy from oxidizing the carbon compounds, right, in organic form, or from solar radiation that's used in photosynthesis, right, to drive the photosynthetic reactions, okay? So we have chemoheterotrophs, chemoautotrophs, photoheterotrophs, and photoautotrophs, okay? So our chemoheterotrophs are our animals, plant roots, which are respiring, right, and using energy from delivered photosynthate, okay, right? Fungi, actinomycetes, most other bacteria. So we have our earthworms, our azotobacter, bacterial species, Pseudomonas, for instance, bacterial species, and then our photoheterotrophs, very rare. Make sure this doesn't happen. Which are including some algae, purple non-silver bacteria, heliobacteria, and then our chemoautotrophs, which many archaea and bacteria do, right? And so these are actually, these little critters that are chemoautotrophs, a lot of times are ammonia oxidizers, right? Turning ammonia into more plant-favorable nitrate, okay? Such as our nitrosomonas. We also have other ones that are doing the same thing with sulfur, such as Theobacillus denitrificans, okay? But these organisms are more important in our nutrient cycling aspects of soil, okay? And then our photoautotrophs, right? Our plant shoots, algae, and cyanobacteria, essentially our photosynthesizers, okay? Corella and Nostra species. All right. So a whole area of soil science has been developed around food webs and the interconnections between food webs and the repercussions of food webs having certain characteristics, etc. Okay, and where the strings are connected in food webs, for instance, right? If, say, for instance, if a certain species of bacteria present all of a sudden goes out or up in population, right? Down or up in population, what does that do to the rest of the soil web in general, right? What happens in a soil web that was devoid of earthworms and all of a sudden has an earthworm addition? What's happening there, right? So soil food web is essentially the trophic levels found within the soil organisms. Found within the organisms, found in the soil, okay? So we have our, similar to, as I mentioned, with our grass, bison, coyote, for instance, situation on our large scale, we have a similar thing in the soil food web where we have our primary producers, or our plants, that are getting their energy from the sun, right? Start somewhere. And they're producing a bunch of plant debris, and we have our primary consumers, which are essentially our cattle or our buffalo, right? Which are just eating it consists of our shredders, etc., which are consuming all the plant matter produced. Then we start to get into secondary and high-level consumers, which are starting to eat the creatures that are eating the material produced by the energy from the sun, okay? And then we have all kinds of byproducts, including CO2, heat energy loss, mineral nutrients, and eventually organic matter. Got a number of animations on this. Did I time it right? We'll see. Again, keep it in mind that all of our energy is originating from the sun, okay? That carbon dioxide, right, has to get fixed via photosynthesis in order to become an organic molecule, right? Which then heterotrophs will use, right, for energy, okay? And then these plants and algae, our primary producers, are going to produce a bunch of plant debris or detritus, which is not quite soil organic matter yet, right? It's just dead part, it's just leaf tissue, etc., okay? So we're going quickly down our trophic levels, right, with our plant debris that's getting fed on by our mites and earthworms, saprophytic fungi, right? And then those animals are dying and getting eaten and pooping, right? And with more down the chain, less reactive feces, essentially, or packed nutrients, right? Then those nutrients are going into their bodies and they're still dying off eventually. And those nutrients that were there, right, the mineral nutrients, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, etc., right? They're still going to be in those dead bodies, which can then get fed upon further down the trophic levels. Okay? And we have a feedback mechanism also from our high-level consumers, right? Also feeding on the animals that are feeding straight on the plant debris, and then feeding on the whole line from primary to secondary consumers, right? Until we get to our high levels. So, as you can see from all of these arrows, is we have a super intricate, hence the name web, right? Super intricate connection between all of these levels and all the categories within, and all the creatures within all the levels. Make sure this thing doesn't fall asleep. Excuse me. There we go. Sorry. And so, our organic matter, right, is getting produced with our bacteria and fungi, right? Decomposers, okay? And then our CO2 is getting taken up out of the air by our primary producers, right? This is also why they say that healthy soil systems sequester sequester soil carbon, right? They turn atmospheric carbon into soil carbon via healthy primary producers, right? Growing up and breaking apart CO2, taking CO2 into their plant tissues or their living tissues for algae and et cetera and everything like that, right? And then all of a sudden that CO2 is organic and held out of the atmosphere, okay? So, as the little running theme in the grassland and the buffalo and the bison and the coyotes, okay, soil is an entire ecosystem in itself, right? And different soils in different ecosystems hold different soil organisms, which have interactions with all kinds of other soil organisms that are present there. And so there is an environmental effect on what organisms are where, to what extents and what levels, and what processes they're carrying out. But we do have similar trends, right, throughout all soils of having present trophic levels and energy fluxes that are somewhat followable, right, traceable. And with that, we'll get into the rhizosphere.
Mahalo.